The storm outside did not begin with thunder. It began with silence. The kind of silence that creeps into a home when love has already started to fade. Eleanor sat by the wide glass window of the mansion she had once called her dream, her hands wrapped protectively around her pregnant belly. The steady tapping of rain against the glass mirrored the uneven beats of her heart. She could feel her son move inside her, an innocent life unaware of the war tearing apart his parents. That night was supposed to be like any other, warm, safe, filled with the comfort of family. Instead, it was the night her husband, David, decided to end their story. Once, she had believed she was living a fairy tale. David had swept into her life like a force of nature, charismatic, ambitious, unstoppable. She met him at a charity gala, long before he became the millionaire everyone envied. He had been different then, less polished, more human. He laughed too loudly, danced without caring who watched, and when he looked at her, it was as though the rest of the world ceased to exist. Eleanor had grown up with little, raised by a mother who stitched clothes for neighbors to keep food on the table. But she had grown up rich in values, kindness, humility, and the belief that true love was worth more than gold. David seemed to believe the same. When he proposed to her under the stars in the little park by her mother's house, she had no doubts. She chose love, not wealth. The early years of their marriage were filled with laughter and simplicity. They lived in a modest apartment while David worked day and night to build his company. Eleanor would wait up for him, a pot of tea on the table, listening as he shared his dreams of success. He would tell her that everything he was building was for them, for their future children, for the family he wanted more than anything. And she believed him. She believed in him with a faith so strong that even when the world doubted him, she never did. As the years passed, his efforts bore fruit. Deals turned into contracts, contracts turned into fortunes, and soon the modest apartment was replaced with a grand estate. They moved into a mansion with marble floors, glittering chandeliers, and gardens large enough to get lost in. But along with the wealth came changes. David became sharper, more distant, his laughter quieter, his evenings shorter. The man who once lingered at the dinner table now excused himself with phone calls that lasted hours. The husband who once held her hand in the middle of the night now rolled over and faced the wall. Eleanor told herself it was the price of success. That he was tired. That he was stressed. That love, though quieter, still existed. And then the pregnancy came, a miracle that filled her heart with hope. She imagined this child would bring them closer, that David's eyes would light up again, that they would reclaim the warmth of their early years. For a while, she thought she was right. When she told him she was expecting, he smiled, kissed her, and held her longer than he had in months. She thought the storm had passed. But storms do not end with one smile. It began with whispers. David's colleagues spoke of a woman they had seen him with, a woman whose beauty turned heads, whose presence commanded attention. Eleanor dismissed it at first. She trusted him. She had to. But the signs grew harder to ignore. Perfume that wasn't hers clung to his suits. His phone lit up at midnight with names he wouldn't explain. Business trips extended without warning. And though she never saw the woman's face, Eleanor felt her shadow in every room. The breaking point came on a rainy evening much like the one where she now sat. She had prepared his favorite meal, believing, hoping, that tonight he would stay home. She set the table with care, her belly heavy but her heart light with anticipation. Hours passed, but David never came. Finally, near midnight, the sound of the door opening filled the mansion. Eleanor rushed to greet him, only to stop dead in her tracks. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loosened, his eyes carrying a guilt so thinly veiled it might as well have been confession. She asked him where he had been, her voice trembling. He did not lie this time. He looked at her with a coldness she had never seen before and said, simply, with someone who understands me better. The words sliced through her. She staggered back, clutching her belly as though shielding her child from the cruelty of his voice. In that moment, everything, the years of love, the promises under the stars, the whispered dreams at night, collapsed like a house of cards. She begged him to stay, not for her, but for their unborn child. But David's mind was made up. He packed his bags with calm efficiency, his indifference louder than any argument. The storm outside howled, but inside, silence reigned. Eleanor sank to the floor when the door slammed shut. She wept until her body ached, her tears mixing with the rain pounding against the windows. She thought of the boy growing inside her, the boy who would never know the father she once loved. She thought of the life she had built, now shattered by betrayal. And for the first time since she met David, she felt utterly, devastatingly alone. But even as despair threatened to consume her, a faint kick inside her womb reminded her she was not alone. Her son was still there, waiting to be born, waiting for her strength. She pressed her hand against her belly and whispered through tears that she would not give up. Not now, not ever. Yet as she tried to breathe through the pain, she couldn't escape the haunting question that clung to her heart: who was this woman powerful enough to take away everything she had? And why had David been so willing to abandon love, family, and loyalty for her? Little did Eleanor know, the answer would one day shake her world again, because the mistress was not merely a passing affair. She was an heiress, the daughter of one of the most powerful casino families in America. A woman whose wealth and influence were enough to tempt even the strongest of men. David had not just chosen another woman, he had chosen a different world. And Eleanor, left broken and betrayed, would soon learn that her story was far from over. The weeks after David's departure blurred into a haze of grief and survival. Eleanor would wake each morning to silence, the vastness of the mansion pressing down on her like a weight she could not carry. She had thought wealth would shield her from loneliness, but the chandeliers, the velvet curtains, the polished marble, all of it felt like a gilded cage. Even the nursery she had so lovingly prepared became a place of sorrow. She had painted its walls soft blue, hung tiny stars from the ceiling, and placed a rocking chair by the window where she imagined she and David would cradle their baby together. Now, every detail was a reminder of promises broken. Her mother came often, bringing soups and gentle words, but Eleanor could see the worry in her eyes. Pregnancy was never meant to be endured in loneliness, and yet that was Eleanor's reality. Nights were the hardest. She would lie awake, the child shifting within her, and remember how David once whispered his excitement about fatherhood. She had imagined him holding her hand in the delivery room, tears of joy in his eyes. Instead, the thought of his arms wrapped around another woman burned her from the inside. Her body grew heavier, her spirit weaker, but still she carried on. She attended doctor appointments alone, signing forms where his signature should have been. She held back tears in waiting rooms as other couples sat hand in hand, whispering dreams for their unborn children. When strangers congratulated her, she smiled politely, never revealing the storm inside. She wasn't just carrying a child, she was carrying betrayal, abandonment, and heartbreak all at once. Yet, in the midst of despair, life has a way of planting seeds of strength. Eleanor discovered a small community center nearby that hosted gatherings for expectant mothers. At first, she hesitated, fearing judgment, but eventually she walked through its doors. There, she found women from all walks of life, single mothers, widows, young wives, and older women, all bound by the shared journey of motherhood. For the first time since David's departure, Eleanor felt seen. They laughed together, cried together, shared stories of struggle and resilience. Slowly, she began to realize she wasn't as alone as she thought. But the shadow of the other woman never left her. Whispers reached her ears, carried by the cruel tongues of society. David's mistress was no ordinary temptress. She was Veronica Delgado, the heiress to the Delgado casino empire in Las Vegas, a dynasty worth billions. Veronica wasn't merely beautiful, she was untouchable, her family commanding power and influence across states. To David, who had always chased status as much as wealth, she was irresistible. Eleanor learned of lavish trips he now took with her, photographs in tabloids of him standing by Veronica's side, dressed in suits that glistened under casino lights. The revelation crushed Eleanor. She had been left not for love, but for power. She was discarded because she couldn't offer the glittering empire that Veronica could. The man who once swore he needed nothing but her had sold his heart for a crown of neon lights. It was not only betrayal, it was humiliation. Still, she pressed on. When the day of labor arrived, Eleanor was rushed to the hospital in the middle of the night, her mother by her side. The pain was excruciating, but the heartbreak she carried was heavier than the contractions. She clutched the sheets, whispering through tears that she would do this alone if she had to. Hours later, as dawn-broken light poured into the delivery room, her son entered the world with a cry so strong it silenced her sorrow. They placed the baby in her arms, his tiny body warm against her chest, his eyes blinking open for the first time. In that moment, Eleanor felt something shift within her. The emptiness left by David's betrayal was filled with a new kind of love, pure, unconditional, unshakable. She named him James, after her late father, a man who had embodied strength, integrity, and kindness. She promised James she would give him a life filled with love, even if she had to carry the weight alone. The months that followed were grueling. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, the loneliness of raising a newborn without a partner, all of it tested her to her core. Yet every smile James gave her, every tiny hand wrapped around her finger, renewed her determination. She discovered reserves of strength she never knew she had. She painted again, turning her grief into colors and shapes that captured the rawness of her heart. Friends who had once kept their distance slowly returned, drawn by her resilience. Soon, local galleries noticed her work, and what began as therapy blossomed into a livelihood. Her paintings, haunting yet hopeful, began to sell. Meanwhile, news of David's life seeped into the public eye. At first, he seemed to thrive. Photos of him in casinos, yachts, and private jets flooded society pages. But behind the glamorous facade, cracks began to show. The Delgado family, it turned out, did not welcome him as an equal. He was tolerated as Veronica's companion, nothing more. The heiress who had stolen him from Eleanor was cold and calculating, her affection conditional. When David's business ventures began to falter, the Delgados offered no help. To them, he was a passing amusement, not family. By the time James turned 1, David's empire had begun to collapse. Investors withdrew, scandals arose, and the fortune he had chased slipped through his fingers like sand. Eleanor heard of his downfall from afar, but she no longer cared. She was too busy living, too focused on raising James with dignity and love. Her strength became her reputation. Mothers in the community turned to her for advice, women abandoned by partners found hope in her story, and her paintings reached international galleries. Eleanor, once known only as the wife of a millionaire, now stood on her own as an artist, a mother, and a survivor. The mistress's identity had once been her deepest wound. But in time, Eleanor realized that Veronica's wealth and power could never replace what she and James had. Love rooted in truth, not ambition. The heiress might have taken her husband, but she could never take her peace. And when, years later, David appeared at her doorstep, his face aged by regret, his eyes hollow with loss, Eleanor opened the door not with anger, but with quiet grace. He begged for forgiveness, for a second chance, but she had long since moved on. She did not need revenge. Life had already delivered justice. She simply told him she wished him peace and closed the door, turning back to the son who was now her entire world. Eleanor had been abandoned, humiliated, left to break alone. But she emerged stronger than she ever imagined, proving that betrayal could not define her, that heartbreak could not destroy her, and that love, true, selfless love, was not lost when her husband walked away. It was reborn in the tiny heart of her son.